The Bhagavad Gita is constructed as a precise philosophical architecture containing 18 chapters. The text divides into 3 groups of 6 chapters, or hexads. The first focuses on the yoga of action, and the final on the yoga of knowledge. Between them lies the yoga of devotion. Nestled inside that central hexad is Chapter 9, titled Vidya Raja Guhya Yoga. It sits as the Garbhagriha, the exact structural and theological inner sanctum of the entire composition. Understanding the Gita's ultimate conclusion requires looking past the margins and examining the specific metaphysical claims made at this central point. Prior to this text, the prevailing spiritual system in ancient India was karma kanda, a framework built on transactional Vedic ritualism. These rituals required immense precision and expensive ceremonies orchestrated by a highly trained priestly class. Because of these heavy material dependencies, spiritual liberation became a socio-economic privilege, largely restricted to elite castes who could afford to sponsor the rites. The existing system was inherently exclusionary. Opening the doors to universal salvation required a new metaphysical framework to bypass these financial and social barriers. Krishna begins Chapter 9 by offering a new sovereign science to Arjuna, specifically because he is a non-envious student. The text establishes 2 primary claims about this knowledge. It is pratyakshavagamam, meaning directly realizable, and it is susukam, meaning joyous and easy to execute. This challenged the assumptions of the era, which dictated that enlightenment required painful physical mortification or decades of inaccessible scholarly erudition. By declaring the ultimate truth to be both directly realizable and joyful to practice, Chapter 9 strips away the physical and intellectual gatekeeping maintained by ancient spiritual elites. The chapter then introduces a massive ontological paradox. How can an infinite, unchangeable supreme reality contain a universe full of finite matter without becoming tainted by it? To answer this, Krishna defines the avyakta murti, the unmanifest form of the divine that acts as the subtle, invisible substratum pervading all existence. This 3D coordinate grid represents infinite space, the atmospheric analogy from verse 9.6. Material creation moves through this divine container like a violent wind. Yet, no matter how chaotic the wind becomes, the underlying spatial grid remains completely unmodified, holding the turbulence without bending. The divine consciousness provides the ontological container for physical reality. It holds all matter and chaos, yet remains completely unattached and untransformed by it. We can expand this static model across the timeline of cosmic ages, or kalpas, observing how the universe repeatedly cycles through creation and dissolution. Verses 9.9 and 9.10 explain that material nature, prakriti, executes the mechanical laws of karma and evolution entirely on its own. The divine functions exclusively as the adhyaksha, sitting as an impartial, detached catalytic observer overseeing the system. By delegating the mechanics of creation to autonomous natural laws, the text insulates the absolute, ensuring the divine is not responsible for cosmic suffering and material inequality. Krishna then applies this mechanical logic to critique traditional Vedic polytheism, which promises heavenly rewards for good deeds. Mapping this transactional system onto a flowchart, we see an input of rituals leading directly to an output in the heavenly realms. But those realms are finite. Once the generated karmic merit burns out, the soul drops back into mortal transmigration, or samsara. Traditional rituals fail to provide ultimate liberation. They merely trap the practitioner in a closed entropic loop of temporary pleasure followed by inevitable rebirth. To break that loop, verse 9.26 introduces a structural shift in the path to liberation. The acceptable offering is stripped down to a simple leaf, a flower, a fruit, or a drop of water, provided it is offered with devotion. Verse 9.27 expands this concept to all human action, stating that whatever you eat, whatever work you do, or whatever you give away should be consecrated as an offering to the divine. Renunciation here shifts from ascetic withdrawal in a cave to integrating spiritual intent into daily life. By shifting the metric of spiritual value away from external wealth and rituals to internal intent, Chapter 9 dematerializes liberation, making it accessible to anyone. This universal access relies on the foundational law of justice stated in verse 929. The Supreme is equally present in all beings, holding no personal favoritism or hatred. Krishna explains that grace functions through reciprocity rather than divine favoritism. Like sunlight reflecting off a mirror, the divine presence is available to all, but only felt by the consciousness that turns to face it. This strict impartiality guarantees a universal promise of redemption. Women, merchants, laborers, and those restricted by ancient social structures all attain the supreme destination. The text declares that even a person with a history of terrible conduct is instantly considered righteous the moment their internal resolve is realigned. Chapter 9 establishes a new metric. Spiritual eligibility is defined entirely by the purity of intent, overriding past moral failures and entrenched social hierarchies. These concepts provided the theoretical bedrock for the historical Bhakti movement, which democratized spiritual practice across South Asia. Because this chapter sits at the exact pivot of the Gita, its ultimate conclusion remains fiercely debated among competing philosophical schools. Advaita scholars argue this personal devotion ultimately dissolves into non-dual knowledge, while Vaishnava scholars maintain this devotion is the eternal, ultimate reality of the soul itself. Chapter 9 endures as a philosophical masterpiece because its elegant panentheistic model merges the scale of absolute transcendence with the intimate, accessible power of human devotion.